What if I told you that the one person in the world who has abandoned you more than anybody else, who has left you high and dry when it really counted time after time, is actually you? In this video, I am going to reveal to you what I call the abandonment loop, a vicious cycle where the harder we try to fit in and make people happy, the more isolated and invisible we end up feeling. This is something that blew my mind when I learned about it. So, what is the abandonment loop? At the very beginning, I said that you are the one who has abandoned yourself. I want to be clear, I do not condone any physical abandonment or rejection that you've gone through. If a parent left you or you felt completely betrayed by an ex, that's a terrible thing to have happen, and nobody deserves to be made to feel alone and worthless like that. But here's the thing. On some subconscious level, many of us have the idea that we do, in fact, deserve that. And for even more of us, even if we were never actually abandoned, we learned early in life that we had to be a certain way or take care of other people, make them happy, in order to get our own needs met. We grew up not actually being abandoned, but with a fear of doing something wrong and being rejected. Those internalized beliefs of worthlessness or fears of rejection don't just sit there. They fester into what we call an abandonment wound. And this is a subconscious framework of beliefs where we think that people are going to leave us, or abandon us, or reject us, or hurt us. These wounds trigger compensation behaviors, actions we take to make up for this perceived lack. So maybe you're a people pleaser. You try to make everybody around you like you. Maybe you're the nice guy. You're always going out of your way to be giving or do extra things for people, hoping that they will look favorably on you. These things all have a sort of practical application in our day-to-day lives, but often they are driven subconsciously by a certain fear that if somebody was to see deep down to who we really are, we would be found wanting. We would not be enough, and we would be rejected or abandoned. Pay attention, because this is where it gets crazy. Now you might think that, okay, yeah, but that's not really that bad, right? Like, that's just being a good person. But subtly, in essence, when we act out of that fear of abandonment, every single step we take to try to get other people to like us results in us abandoning ourselves. Every time we agree to plans that we secretly hate just to go along with the crowd, we're telling ourselves that those people's opinions are more important than what I want to do. Every time you go out of your way to avoid conflict, you squelch your own value system because, well, I don't know if I can stand up for myself. What we're actually doing time after time after time is rejecting ourselves over and over and over again in favor of choosing almost anybody except us. We've now created a self-fulfilling prophecy where we might feel empty and incomplete, but in our hunger to feel whole and accepted, we constantly reject ourselves. We constantly tell ourselves no to get other people to like us, hoping for them to tell us yes. But of course, even if they do tell us yes, it doesn't actually matter because we're still telling ourselves no. We can end up in relationships with friends, family, or at work where we feel taken advantage of. We feel like people put their work on us or we don't get credit. But we're also uncomfortable having conversations about these things, maybe with our boss or with our spouse. We're uncomfortable bringing up the things that we don't like. We continually repress that because, well, what if they leave? What if I get fired? What if I get rejected? What if they dismiss me? Once again, we abandon ourselves first. The very first thing we do is tell ourselves, nope, not good enough, won't work, can't do it. And this is the cruel irony of the abandonment loop, is that the harder we strive to get other people to like us, to make ourselves feel like we won't be abandoned, the more we adapt and try to keep people around us to make ourselves feel safe and loved, the more isolated and invisible we can feel, because subtly we are still rejecting ourselves. We're not even giving other people the opportunity to reject us anymore. This dynamic blew my mind when I learned about it, because it changed my view on so many things that I had taken for granted, so many situations in which I had thought life just didn't make sense, and I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to, being a nice, good guy, and nobody was meeting my needs in return. I was not comfortable expressing my own needs or being in my own energy. I was terrified of rejection. And what I was subtly doing was consistently rejecting myself and hoping that other people would come by and say, "Andrew, you're so great. Andrew, you're so cool. Andrew, we just love you so much." And that would somehow fill that inner void. I was denying myself that permission. I was denying myself the opportunity to be the leader in my own life. I was denying myself the opportunity to be the main character in my story. And that is your true role as well, to be the main character in your story. Now, don't get too crazy, because to be clear, I'm not saying we should just say, fuck everybody else, I'm gonna only focus on me, 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 and do what I want. Not at all. What I'm talking about is when you're on an airplane and they give you the safety briefing that nobody really listens to, they say, your oxygen masks are going to deploy from the ceiling, and before you try to help somebody else, put your own oxygen mask on so that you're not gasping for air when you're trying to help other people. There is nothing wrong with helping other people. There's nothing wrong with being a good person or a nice person, if you're doing it for the right reasons. But most of us, if we are stuck in this abandonment wound, in this abandonment fearful energy that people are going to leave us or we're going to be rejected, we are doing our very best in life to consistently put oxygen masks on everybody else, and then we're wondering why we can't breathe. It's because we haven't taken the time to put our own oxygen mask on. And to make things even more twisted and ironic, the further we chase people, the harder we pursue them. Very often, if we are coming from the energy of abandonment, the further we push them away. And this is because we are hoping that they will fill that void, whether they are a person or a job or a new situation, a new career you envision for yourself. And you want it so badly because you feel like it's going to validate that inner feeling of worthlessness, that I'll show them, this is gonna prove it. And the crazy thing is that the more importance we tend to put on these things, the more we wish we had them, the more we want them, the more we are sort of subtly, energetically saying that we don't deserve them. Oh my gosh, my life is empty without that. That would make me feel so much better. That's a hungry, lack-based energy. The entire dynamic stems from the fact that you don't accept yourself. So now that you understand what this loop is and a little bit of how it functions, let's talk about where it comes from and then, crucially, what we can do about it. For many of us, these wounds are based in our childhood. At some point when we were growing up, we learned that our parents reacted better if we behaved a certain way, or they disciplined us if we got out of line and didn't do what we were supposed to. Maybe we got yelled at if we got bad grades. Maybe we were actually physically abandoned or harmed. These are terrible things to have happen, and even more terribly, we see them through the lens of an immature child, right? We don't understand the world. So we don't think, okay, this person just has some messed up expectations and they're like projecting that on me. No, we think, this is the way that the world works, and I am bound by this like gravity. This is real. This is who I have to be, or I will be rejected and abandoned. And as a little kid, especially, those rejection and abandon instincts are very strong because we will literally die if we are a little kid and we are abandoned. It might, as an adult, of course, feel like your abandonment wound is death, and it does, trust me. I've been there, right? But it's not actually death. Not at all. The difference is that we psychologically revert to that childlike terror at the thought of being fundamentally rejected for who we are. And we desperately strive over and over to prove our worth. We are trying to prove to people that we are good enough. We go above and beyond. We people please. We avoid conflict. We give amazing gifts. We do everything to be perfect. All in order to compensate for our deep-rooted fear that if somebody saw who we really were, if they saw our real selves, they would leave. They would abandon us. They would reject us. This was something that was kind of crazy for me earlier in life. I realized I used to apologize a lot for being in people's way. Sometimes I was not in their way. I was a reflection of my belief somehow that I did not have the right to be in this physical space. I was always feeling like I was in somebody's way or I was standing in the wrong spot. And I had a coworker one day. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, man. Get out of your way." He said, "Andrew, you're not in my way. Why are you apologizing?" And I didn't have an answer. And it really did make me think, why was I constantly apologizing for being in people's way? It was because I did not believe deeply. I had never thought about it, but deeply, I believed that I needed to justify my right to exist in a space with other people. To take up space on Earth, I felt like I needed to prove myself. And although it's painful to say, perhaps as a child you needed to be that way, right? Maybe due to your situation, you had to actually perform a certain way. You had to change who you were. You had to make sure everybody else was happy. But now, if you're watching this, I'm assuming you are very likely an adult. Meaning, you don't actually have to be that way anymore. Sometimes somebody can reject you in real life, and they're just wrong. They're just having a bad day. It doesn't actually mean anything about you. But if you are the person who has the abandonment wound, because we go around looking for validation, we go around looking, saying, look how great I am. Please, would you recognize me so I can feel better about myself? Almost everybody has the power to hurt the person who is deeply afraid of abandonment. But only, once again, because subtly we give them that power. This cascades out into a multitude of negative effects. We are afraid so deeply of that rejection that we won't go talk to somebody we find attractive. What if they reject us? What if they... it'd be better to not even try. And whose voice says that? Is it theirs, or is it the internalized voice they learned as a little kid? From a parent, a teacher, from their environment, from society, from a random person that taught them to think that way about themselves. Now that voice is no longer external. It has become internal. We say, I reject that idea. I'm never going to let anybody else see it. We won't have conversations with our bosses or with our friends about what we'd like to move forward in our job or what's not working in our relationships. We are afraid to be our authentic self. We say somewhere inside, no, that wouldn't work, which might be true for a specific job or a specific person, a specific situation. But what we do, because we are so afraid of abandonment, so innerly lacking in our feeling of worth, we think that, well, not only would this job not really like who I really am, but nobody would. And in fact, I might as well hold on to this job, even though I'm not feeling satisfied here, because I don't know what else is going to come along. We become so small, so fearful, and so dismissive of our own innate power, our authenticity, and our ingenuity. And we start to hold on to relationships and friends, so-called, that we are not comfortable being authentic around because they're the only thing that sort of fills that gap. But it never really works. So now that we know what this loop is and where it comes from, what do we do about it? Well, the very first thing is cut yourself a little bit of slack, because those of us with abandonment wounds, with feelings of unworthiness, tend to have a very strong inner critic voice The very first thing most people will do is say, okay, wait, no, this is great. This is great news. I understand the problem. I see it in a whole new light, but now I just need to fix it. I just need to perfect myself, and then I'll never get rejected again. Then I'll never get hurt again. Once I'm able to be the perfect me, once I'm able to be my best self, then, and only then, will I give myself permission to go out and be human. Please don't do that. Because what that is actually more self-rejection, just taking advantage of a new scenario. Then you're stuck in the pattern of trying to fix your abandonment wound, and you're still rejecting yourself because having an abandonment wound, well, that's not good enough, but once I fix that, then I'll be good enough. It's the same thing. So then what do you actually do? Well, the very first thing is to just start noticing when you are rejecting yourself. Awareness is the first step in any transformation. You have to notice in your life where this pattern is taking place. So notice and question. Is it true when you feel like you have to go along with somebody? When somebody's pushing you around and you don't know what to do? When you feel compelled to be nice even though you really don't want to go do whatever this person's saying, or you really don't want this thing? Is it true that you have to follow that? Ask yourself this. Maybe after the fact, because you might fall through a couple times. We don't all succeed 100%, and that is okay. Start with some awareness and some acceptance for where you are and for your right to be where you are, both physically and emotionally. So assuming you've seen and developed a little bit of awareness as to where these patterns are operating in your own life, I'm going to give you 3 things that I have found very helpful when it comes to embodying that more authentic, less fear of abandonment energy. These things require you to trust yourself, to stop abandoning yourself, to stop telling yourself that you can't do it, that you're not good enough, that you're not worth it. The very first thing is developing new skills, starting a new hobby, doing something that gets you out of your day-to-day routine, and perhaps something that you're a little afraid to do, something that you're afraid people will think badly of you for. For instance, for me, I learned to be a Dungeons and Dragons dungeon master, and initially I was a little bit afraid. I felt like you gotta prepare and be in charge of 4 or 5 people, kind of lead them through this whole thing, do funny voices, and I was very uncomfortable about it. But over time, I gave myself permission. And this is the overarching theme, by the way, between these 3 things I'm going to mention. The overarching theme is rewriting where in your life success comes from. Success is when you take the step, not the result, but when you take the step into that fear, into that unknown, when you give yourself permission, when that scared voice says, no, I need to abandon myself and do what everybody else wants. I need to abandon myself, make them all happy. Success in that case is saying, no, it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter if they're all happy. It matters that I act authentically. I act in line with that true nature. That is what's going to make the difference. So, in dungeon mastering, I gave myself the permission, right, to try this new thing. Now I've been doing it for 4 years, but I was pretty terrified. I was very nervous. I was very anxious, and I sucked at it a little bit in the beginning, as we do in these things. Secondly, I have found that taking trips by myself is one of the most impactful things that has helped me build confidence and stop abandoning myself so much. For the longest time, I thought, you need somebody else to go with you. You can't do it. You're not good enough. What are you going to do? You're probably going to die out there, man. You can't figure this out. All this negative stuff, self-abandonment, over and over and over, all these fears causing me to avoid things, subtly abandoning my own interests. For me, I started with a couple of trips, day trips, driving around, visiting different places, national parks, then traveling internationally for a couple weeks, then traveling internationally for a couple of months by myself. That was an amazing confidence booster. I was sort of terrified, but I still did it, and what I learned about myself, what I learned about being okay by myself was massive, because for so long I was so afraid of being alone, right? So afraid of doing something wrong and being left. And here I had proof that I would be okay. And like the first thing, this was a success based on doing. The success was pushing into that new territory that felt scary to the abandonment fear. It was honoring my authentic right to exist and try and fail from the perspective of my previous self, knowing that the true failure would be to stay in that small, terrified mindset, right? What happens doesn't really matter, but it's where you are coming from internally, why you are doing it, what is motivating that behavior that actually makes the difference. For me, it was stepping into that authentic energy. Thirdly, along those same lines, giving yourself permission to have some difficult conversations with people you're afraid to bring things up with. Maybe that's your boss, maybe that's your friends, maybe that's your relationship. It might mean saying no to things. It might mean asking for something new in a relationship, or asking to try something new with your partner. Hey, let's go take a yoga class, or learn Tai Chi, or go learn to cook, or whatever. You might be afraid on some level that your partner will think this is weird. Oh, what are they going to think about me? What are they going to say? You are, on some level, rejecting yourself for their sake. What are they going to think? They'll think I'm weird. They won't like it. Whatever. My boss, if I mention this idea, he's going to look down on me. Subjugating yourself for the opinions of others. It's okay if you are in line with yourself to let go of things. Say, this is not worth my time. I'm not going to fight this. But if you are doing that with a deep feeling inside, I really should say something, I really need to do something, I'm really not okay with this, and you still go along with it, that's where the failure comes in. That's where the true failure comes in, because the only success, as far as I'm concerned, is in stepping into that new arena, giving yourself that inner permission to be in that fearless space, or rather, push into fear. Not that you will be fearless, but to act courageously. And this cascades through your life, because the more you are able to authentically shine who you are, the more you will connect with other people who authentically shine who they are. The more you connect with yourself, the more you will attract people who resonate with that new energy. And this is initially terrifying to the person who's afraid of abandonment, because the person who is afraid of abandonment wants to hold on to everything. They want to keep everything. They don't feel comfortable letting people leave, letting situations leave, because they need to control. They need to feel secure, and they don't like this scarcity. But the scarcity is not real. The scarcity is in your mindset of what you see you as being worth. When we believe I am small and limited and tiny and worthless, so I can only have these things, then we have to hold on to them. That's a terrible place to live, but it's where so many of us live our entire lives. And when we're stuck in those patterns of self-abandonment, our fundamental orientation towards life tends to be scarcity, clinging, insecurity, fear. We're so desperate to hold on that we don't realize we're holding on to things that we don't even like very often. We can be holding on to a bad relationship, holding on to a job that we hate, but we're so afraid that if we let go, nothing good will take its place. We're so convinced that we will be left out, we will be abandoned, we will be rejected, we'll be isolated, we'll be annihilated, that we hold on because this has to be better than nothing. But only when we let go can new things come in the first place. Many of us have room in our lives for new to come in. The success comes from your action in alignment with yourself. When you give yourself that permission to breathe, to be, to exist. It's not saying everybody else has to see the world the way I do. It's not saying you have to disrespect other people. It is saying you have to equally respect yourself. Breaking this loop is really about self-love. It's about self-acceptance, and it's about giving yourself that inner permission to be the main character in your own life, to put on your own oxygen mask, not to be selfish, but so that you can actually genuinely help other people put their masks on. You can't do that if you are gasping for air. If you're dying looking for any oxygen, you're not help to anybody. But when you're able to take care of that fundamental need for yourself, to say, you know what, I'm good. I'm going to pick me. I'm not going to hope everybody else does, but I'm going to pick me first. And then I can support others. Then I can be there for other people truly, not manipulatively, but authentically and wholly there and present. That's a beautiful thing. That's the opposite of neediness. That is genuine giving and genuine presence, and that is what will make you incredibly attractive. The key is to practice awareness, to notice in your life where you are telling yourself no before anybody has the chance to, where you are abandoning yourself so that other people won't. Because as long as you keep doing that, you are sending yourself the message over and over. You deserve this. You're not good enough. You can't do it. You're worthless. Whatever. That is a terrible place to be. And if you've been there, if you're there now, my heart goes out to you because I have been there too, right? And don't beat yourself up about it. It's very human. Ironically, the more we beat ourselves up, the more we condemn ourselves to stay in this loop. Just look at it for a second and see that that is not true. And the more you reject, the more you deny yourself, the more you punish yourself, the more hungry that inner void feels. For those of you who are interested in more guidance on these topics, I am extremely passionate about them and helping people through them, and I do offer one-on-one coaching, which you can find a link to in the description, where I'm happy to go over these topics, lay out action plans for individual people. I provide exercises and reflections and just a safe space for people to talk and be their authentic self and be seen and heard. I genuinely enjoy doing that. So check that out if you are interested. And if you enjoyed this video, what you need to do next is check out this video right here on inner child healing, where we talk about these wounds, these deep-rooted wounds, where they come from, and some other ways in which they manifest, and how we can heal our inner child. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.